and a very warm good afternoon to all the colleagues. We could not hold the last week briefing due to traffic restrictions around the red zone. So I'll very briefly sum up the developments in the last 2 weeks before opening the floor for question answers. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with a very disturbing news coming from our international border with Afghanistan. In the border areas of South Waziristan, adjacent to Banu district, including Angur Adda, Afghan forces have carried out unprovoked firing and shelling on April 26th and 29th, targeting civilian population. As a result of these incidents, several people were injured and multiple houses were damaged during the attacks. Among those were among those who were injured included women and children aged 3, 8, and 10. Local tribal elders and residents have expressed serious concerns over these incidents, condemning the cross border firing and shelling from Afghanistan and demanding that these be stopped immediately. We echo these concerns and express our strongest condemnation. It is worth mentioning that similar incidents of cross border firing and shelling have been reported in this area before, where the civilians were targeted. So, strongly condemning these attacks from Afghanistan, we express sympathy and solidarity with the affected families. All possible measures are being taken for their assistance, and efforts are ongoing to ensure safety of local population is ensured and there's a prevention of further incidents. Moving to the Middle East, ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan's constructive diplomatic engagement, supporting de escalation, ceasefire efforts, and the broader pursuit of stability between the United States and Iran continued. Our sustained interaction with both Washington and Tehran was maintained in the last 2 weeks. Pakistan remained committed to regional stability and international peace, reflecting our preference for principled, dialogue oriented diplomacy and addressing complex geopolitical challenges and managing festering disputes. In this context, under the leadership of Prime Minister Mohammad Shehbaz Sharif, as well as our Deputy Prime Minister Senator Muhammad Ishaq Dar, and Chief of Army Staff and the Chief of Defence Forces Field Marshal Asim Munir, Pakistan maintained open channels of communications with the parties. Let me highlight some of the key markers of these highest level developments. On April 19th, Prime Minister Mohammad Shahbaz Sharif held telephone conversation with His Excellency Dr. Masoud Pezeshkian, the President of the Islamic Republic of Iran. During their warm and cordial conversation that lasted for around 45 minutes, our Prime Minister apprised the Iranian President about his own recent engagements with a number of world leaders, including the leadership of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey. This telephone conversation took place just following the Prime Minister's three-nation visit, and therefore the conversation was contextualized in the conversations of the Prime Minister in these three capitals. The Prime Minister also thanked the Iranian leadership for their constructive conversation with Field Marshal Sayyid Asim Munir during his visit to Tehran earlier that week. The Prime Minister reaffirmed that with the support of friends and partners, Pakistan would remain fully committed to its honest and sincere efforts to advance regional peace and security, and he also conveyed respectful regards for the Supreme Leader of Iran, His Eminence Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei. On April 16, the Prime Minister was in Saudi Arabia for an extensive discussions with Crown Prince and the Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman bin Abdul Aziz Al Saud. Our media extensively covered this visit. The Prime Minister shared developments related to Pakistan's peace efforts that led to US-Iran ceasefire and his recently held round of historic talks between US and Iran in Islamabad. His Royal Highness appreciated the constructive role of the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Sayyid Asim Munir, as well as our Deputy Prime Minister Senator Muhammad Ishaq Dar. While exchanging views on bilateral issues, the Prime Minister expressed his sincere appreciation for His Royal Highness, expressed consistent and unwavering support of Pakistan to the kingdom. He thanked the Crown Prince for Saudi support to Pakistan's economic stability. The Prime Minister also highlighted that our two countries enjoy unique and very cordial brotherly relations. They were both strategic partners under the Pakistan Saudi Strategic Mutual Defense Agreement. Later that day, the Prime Minister was in Doha. He held meeting with His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the Emir of the State of Qatar. His Highness the Emir expressed his deep appreciation for Pakistan's pivotal role in supporting efforts to de-escalate tensions in the region and promote diplomatic dialogue in a manner that serves regional peace and security. On his part, the Prime Minister renewed and reiterated the strong condemnation of the attacks against Qatar and other Gulf countries, while reaffirming Pakistan's full solidarity and support to the leadership of and the people of Qatar. In the final leg of his three-country visit, the Prime Minister was in Antalya, Turkey, for the Antalya Diplomatic Forum. And on the sidelines of that forum, the Prime Minister held a meeting with the Turkish President, His Excellency Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The President Erdogan praised the Prime Minister's peace efforts and said that Turkey would continue to support this initiative to bring peace in the region. The two leaders emphasized the importance of effectively utilizing the current window of opportunity which exists and offers an opportunity to advance durable and lasting regional peace. Upon his return to Islamabad, ladies and gentlemen, on the 19th of April, the Prime Minister held his second telephone conversation in 3 days with the President of Iran. The Prime Minister apprised President Pezeshkian about the three-country visit, his engagements with a number of world leaders, particularly the leadership of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey. The Prime Minister reaffirmed that with support of the friends and partners, Pakistan would remain fully committed to its honest and sincere efforts to advance regional peace and security. President Pezeshkian, on his part, thanked the Prime Minister and the Field Marshal for Pakistan's strong commitment to success of our peace efforts, while affirming that relations between Pakistan and Iran would continue to grow stronger in the days ahead. Later that evening, Prime Minister Mohammad Shehbaz Sharif received a telephone call from Mr. Antonio Costa, the President of the European Council. During this cordial conversation, the two leaders exchanged views on the current situation in the Middle East. The Prime Minister shared with President Costa the latest updates on Pakistan's diplomatic outreach and peace efforts. President Costa expressed deep appreciation of our very constructive role. Both leaders stressed that the need to continue dialogue and diplomacy to ensure lasting peace in the region, and also agreed to remain in touch. On 25th of April, the Prime Minister held another telephone call with President Pezeshkian. In this 50-minute conversation, the two leaders held a detailed exchange of views on current regional situation and ongoing efforts to promote peace and stability. Our Prime Minister welcomed Iran's decision to send a delegation led by Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi to Islamabad. This delegation arrived over the weekend, as you know, and it held important meetings, including a detailed 2-hour meeting with the Prime Minister. You may recall that the two visits of Prime Minister Araghchi to Islamabad over the weekend afforded us an opportunity to hold meetings with senior leadership to discuss the latest developments, as well as ongoing efforts of regional peace and stability. So, in that context, these visits by Iranian foreign minister were extremely important. Coming back to the telephone conversation between Prime Minister and President Pezeshkian, um, Iranian president thanked our side for the contribution to the peace efforts and agreed to remain in touch. And so this was a very important series of telephone conversations that took place between the Prime Minister and the Iranian president. On 26th April, the Prime Minister received a telephone call from the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Right Honourable Christopher Luxon. Prime Minister Luxon expressed deep appreciation of Pakistan's contribution and constructive diplomatic initiative. The two leaders also agreed to work together, further strengthening Pakistan-New Zealand relations. And our side, the Prime Minister extended a warm invitation to Prime Minister Luxon to undertake an official visit to Pakistan at his earliest convenience. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll be aware that a European Union business delegation was in Pakistan. In fact, some of the delegate members are still here. So this delegation has held business conferences, met business counterparts and senior government officials. And on 28th April, the delegation called on the Prime Minister as well. The delegate members spoke about their respective experience of investment in Pakistan and stated that there was enormous potential of furthering the growth, furthering the investment, promoting business-to-business ties between EU and Pakistan in various fields, including energy, communication, IT. And more than 600 B2B meetings were expected, and many of them materialized during the business forum. Now, moving on to some of the important engagements of the Deputy Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, Senator Mohammad Ishaq Dar. First, he accompanied the Prime Minister to the three-nation visits to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey, and also participated in the Antalya Diplomatic Forum. And on sidelines of that forum, he held bilateral formal meetings with the Foreign Minister of Turkey, the British Foreign Secretary, the Foreign Minister of Egypt, Foreign Minister of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, Vice Minister for Strategy and Intelligence at the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs of Korea, this is Republic of Korea, and President and Chairman Board of Directors at the Foreign Economic Relation Board of Turkey. So these interactions had a very strong bilateral component, particularly the economic content in his meeting with the ROK, Republic of Korea, and Turkish delegation. A milestone event during the Antalya Diplomacy Forum was the meeting of the foreign ministers of Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt. This was the third consultative meeting of the group. We call it R4, the regional four countries. You may recall that the second FM level meeting of this R4 was held in Islamabad last month, and we also hosted a senior official meeting of R4 in Islamabad on 14th April. So at Antalya, the four foreign ministers exchanged views on evolving regional dynamics, reaffirming vital role of dialogue and diplomacy in promoting peace and stability and shared prosperity. They expressed a shared commitment to advancing the partnership, deepening coordination, and expanding collaboration across key areas of mutual interest. At the Antalya Diplomacy Forum, the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister also addressed a panel discussion titled Trading Trust, the Future of Economic Integration and Stability in South Asia. Among other issues, he highlighted the role of the platforms such as SAARC and the United Nations, while also reiterating the need for resolving the Jammu and Kashmir dispute in accordance with the UN Security Council resolutions, with a view to achieving lasting peace and stability in South Asia. Very briefly, I list some of the important telephone conversations that the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister held in during this period. On April 19th, with the Polish Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister. Secondly, with Foreign Minister of Iran. Thirdly, with the Foreign Minister of Canada and Foreign Minister of Egypt on one single day. On April 20th, he held telephone conversations with the Foreign Minister of Australia and Iran. And April 21, with the Foreign Minister of Egypt and Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia. On April 22nd, he held important telephone conversation with the Foreign Minister of Turkey and Kyrgyz Republic. On April 24th, the Foreign Minister of Iran and the Foreign Minister of the Russian Federation. On April 25th, the Foreign Minister of Egypt and Turkey. And on April 27th, he held telephone conversation with the Foreign Minister of Canada and the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, as well as with the Egyptian Foreign Minister. And on April 28th, he held a very detailed conversation with the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, and on April 29th, again with the British Foreign Secretary. So this is the listing of. Very briefly, I'll touch upon Israel and Palestine issue, which remained on our agenda, on our focus. We joined a group of countries to issue two joint statements in the last 2 weeks. First was on April 18th, and this was on Israel announcement of appointment of a diplomatic representative to the so-called Somaliland. This area is part of Somalia, and we uphold the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Somalia. So this diplomatic representation to the so-called Somaliland is in serious violation of international law. On the second joint statement was on April 23rd, condemning the repeated recurring violation of the historic and legal status of Jerusalem's Islamic and Christian holy sites by Israel, particularly the continued incursion by Israel's settlers and extremists into Al-Aqsa Mosque and Al-Haram al-Sharif, putting them under Israeli protection, raising Israeli flag on its courtyard. Separately, we also issued a press statement in our national capacity on the violation of Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, as we speak, our President, His Excellency Asif Ali Zardari, is in China. He is returning tomorrow, I understand. We issued a detailed curtain raiser before he embarked on the visit, and I'm sure you are covering his engagements, important engagements that are taking place there daily. This visit is part of the long-standing tradition of high-level exchanges between Pakistan and China, and it holds special significance in the context of the 75th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between our two countries. So this concludes my opening remarks, and I open the floor for questions.